The SS went from being Hitler's personal bodyguard detachment to a squad of hundreds of thousands of ardent Nazi killers who would be responsible for the crimes of the concentration camps and the death squads during World War II. Many of the men at the top of the Schutzstaffel had wives who were ruthless Nazis themselves, and some were even introduced to the group by their wives. For example, Reinhard Heydrich, the Butcher of Prague, and a man referred to by Hitler as the man with the Iron Heart, was pushed into searching for a job in the SS by his wife, and she even orchestrated a meeting for Heydrich with Himmler. Himmler himself, the Reichsführer SS, the head of the entire organisation, had a wife who was a virulent Nazi, and she would be punished at the end of the war, but was found not guilty for being responsible for her husband's actions. But at the end of the war, many other SS wives went into hiding and tried to evade any form of punishment, but they had all benefited from their husbands' roles in the slaughter of thousands. But what happened to the wives of the top SS Nazis? To support our channel, please make sure to subscribe. Margareta Himmler was a slightly older wife of Heinrich Himmler, the head of the SS. They met in 1927, and she was a blonde-haired, blue-eyed nurse, which in Himmler's books was perfect for him. They did have a lot in common, and they married a year after they met, and she was there as her husband rose to prominence inside the SS. He rose from being a chicken farmer to one of the most powerful men in the whole of Europe. They had a daughter named Gudrun, and Margareta often also fell out with many other high-ranking Nazi wives. Lina Heydrich, for example, had a violent dislike of her, which it's believed was mutual, but in 1938 Heinrich Himmler had begun to seek a relationship with another woman, his young secretary, named Hedwig Höss. They even had 2 children together, a son and a daughter, but during World War II, Margareta Himmler helped to operate military hospitals under the German Red Cross. She rose throughout the ranks and achieved the rank of a colonel in the German Red Cross, and she said of her husband that, "How wonderful that he has been called to great tasks and is equal to them. The whole of Germany is looking to him." Himmler phoned his daughter Gudrun every few days and visited her as much as he could, but Heinrich Himmler and his wife became more estranged as the end of the Second World War came. At the end of the conflict, she was arrested by US forces in Italy along with her daughter and was interrogated during the Nuremberg trials. A period inside of an internment camp came for her, and later Margareta Himmler was classified as a lesser offender inside of the denazification courts. She was later reclassified as a major beneficiary of the SS, and she was not held accountable for the crimes of her husband, but was sentenced to 30 days punitive work, and she also lost her pension rights and her right to vote. Margareta Himmler spent her final years in Munich with her daughter, and her daughter tried to protect her father's memory. However, Margareta Himmler died on the 25th of August 1967 at the age of 73. Ernst Kaltenbrunner was the highest-ranking member of the SS who was brought to the post-war Nuremberg trials. Kaltenbrunner had risen throughout the ranks of the SS to become the chief of the Reich Security Main Office, and he held this position until the end of the war. He had a key role in orchestrating the Holocaust and the genocide caused by the Nazis, and also he kept a close eye on security and law enforcement agencies. Kaltenbrunner oversaw deportations and arrests and a huge number of executions, and he certainly had the blood of hundreds of thousands on his hands. Ernst Kaltenbrunner had married a lady named Elisabeth Kaltenbrunner, and she was also a member of the Nazi Party, and they had 3 children together. All of the children would survive the war, but Kaltenbrunner also had a mistress who he had children by. Elisabeth Kaltenbrunner remained with her husband in the final days of the Second World War as he tried to hide out in the mountain regions. The group eventually were captured following a short standoff, and Elisabeth was also taken into custody. It's not known what level of denazification she received, but her husband wrote her a final letter, and in this he said, "My own destiny lies in the hand of God. I am glad that I never separated from him. I cannot believe that I should be held responsible for the mistakes of our leaders, for in the short time of my activity I have striven hard for reasonable attitudes, both internal and external. They ought to have paid more attention to my words. We have no property worth mentioning. Perhaps the only resource for you will be my small stamp collection. Was it not my duty to open the door to socialism and freedom as we imagined and desired them? I have not given up hope that the truth will be found out, and for a just legal decision. Ernst Kaltenbrunner was executed following the Nuremberg trials, and his wife lived until 2002, dying in Linz, her hometown, and the place where she had met her husband. Reinhard Heydrich was a butcher of Prague, and he was encouraged into a career with the SS by his wife Lina. The pair met and married very quickly, and it was a whirlwind romance. Inside the SS, her husband rose throughout the ranks to become Himmler's number 2, but Lina Heydrich was a virulent Nazi herself. She was violent towards prisoners who worked inside of her own household. Her husband died in 1942 after he was assassinated, but Lina experienced further death in the family, as the following year her son was hit by a truck outside of the family home in Prague. She lived inside her husband's former estate until the end of the war, and shockingly she was actually cleared during denazification proceedings and won the right to receive a pension, which was huge, as her husband was classed as a German police general when he was killed. But the government declined to pay this because of her husband's role in the Holocaust. Lina Heydrich was even tried in absentia, and she was sentenced to life imprisonment, but she never spent a day behind bars. Lina remarried in 1965, and she ran the former Heydrich summer house as a restaurant and inn, until it burned down 4 years later. But she then wrote books about her life and her marriage to her first husband, and a prominent Nazi. She denied her husband's involvement in the Holocaust and remained a staunch supporter of her husband until she died at the age of 74 in August 1985. Despite not being one of the most high-ranking members of the SS, one of the most respected shockingly inside of the organisation was Rudolf Höss, the commandant who built Auschwitz concentration camp from the ground up. Höss was a man who brazenly admitted that he was involved in the extermination of over 1 million people. He was married in 1929 to a lady named Hedwig, and the pair had 5 children. His wife and family came with him when he worked inside of Auschwitz, and they lived inside of a large villa. How much Hedwig Höss knew about the true brutality of Auschwitz is subject to a lot of debate, and it's most probable that she knew what was going on. She tried to claim that she didn't at the end of the war, but her interrogation led to her husband's arrest. She told the Allies that her husband was working as a gardener under a false name, and their wedding rings were engraved with their names. Rudolf Höss was executed, and Hedwig Höss faced no action for her husband's crimes. She would live at the end of the war very quietly in different places, and she actually travelled to America a number of times to visit one of her daughters. She died inside of America and is shockingly actually buried on US soil, under a gravestone that just reads Mother. Adolf Eichmann was one of the major organisers of the Holocaust, and he has been referred to as the architect of it. Eichmann rose throughout the SS, and his crimes were mostly centred around organising and overseeing deportations of hundreds of thousands of people to concentration and extermination centres, including Auschwitz, where they were slaughtered inside the gas chambers. In March 1935, Eichmann married a lady named Veronika Liebel, and the couple had 4 sons. Eichmann actually was arrested at the end of the war, but he did manage to escape and travelled to Argentina, where he lived out for many years under a false name. He was then kidnapped by Mossad agents in 1960 and was brought to trial, and he was then executed. His wife would make a request to see her husband months before his execution one final time, and the request was accepted, and the pair met again. There were many secrets inside of the Eichmann home within South America, and his wife had joined her husband to live in their home. After her husband's execution, she returned to Europe and Germany, leaving her life in South America behind her. But in November 1997, Vera Eichmann died at the age of 88 in Württemberg. Gretl Daluege was a senior member of the SS, and he was the chief of the Order Police, and during the war he had a huge number of police officers under his control. He also later committed many war crimes inside of occupied lands, including in Czechoslovakia. In October 1926, Daluege married Käthe Schwarz, who would become a member of the Nazi Party, and the pair would later adopt a son. Daluege's wife had 3 children with her husband. In 1943, Gretl Daluege had a huge heart attack, and his wife nursed him back to health on their huge estate in western Pomerania, which had been given to them by Hitler. Little is known about what happened to Käthe Daluege following her husband's execution, and it's presumed that now she is dead. Hermann Fegelein has been described as one of the most evil members of the SS. He was a high-ranking commander in the Waffen-SS and committed a massive amount of war crimes with his cavalry units. He was also the brother-in-law of Eva Braun, Hitler's girlfriend and later wife, and he married Gretl Braun in 1944. The marriage was huge and took place in the presence of Hitler. Her husband was somewhat of a flirt, who even enjoyed spending time with Eva Braun, his sister-in-law, and Hermann Fegelein would be shot within the Reich Chancellery Garden on the 28th of April 1945 inside of Berlin. Gretl Braun gave birth to a daughter roughly a week later at Salzburg, and she named this child after her sister Eva. At the end of the war, Gretl Braun would remarry in Munich and died in 1987 at the age of 72. So the wives of many SS commanders at the end of the Second World War did live in obscurity, and many knew about the true crimes of their husbands. Thanks for watching. To support our channel, please make sure to subscribe, and once again, thank you so much for watching.